Hello again everybody, and more in the series on festivals from the classical world. We've had a couple of Greek festivals and now we're moving to Rome for something that was very Roman, very specific to a particular place and kind of to a specific time. On February 15th every year in Rome there took place a festival with some very unusual features. It was called the Lupercalia. It's another festival which has rather obscure origins, but it was very much a fixture in the Roman calendar of religious observance. Now the wolf figures prominently in Roman mythology to do with the story of Romulus and Remus, Romulus being Rome's mythical founder. And in Latin the word lupus is the word wolf, and of course it was a she-wolf who suckled Romulus and Remus when they were infants. Now all of this seems to be connected in some way to the festival of the Lupercalia. Two Roman writers suggest alternatives for the origin of this festival. The first one I'm going to tell you about is Plutarch. Plutarch was a biographer writing in the 2nd century AD. He actually wrote in Greek, but so it's a moot point whether he was a Roman or a Greek, I guess. But anyway, he wrote a series of biographies of famous people from the classical world, and this one comes from his biography of Romulus. As for the Lupercalia, judging by the time of its celebration, it would seem to be a feast of purification, for it's observed on the inauspicious days of the month of February, which name can be interpreted to mean purification, and the very day of the feast was anciently called Febrata. But the name of the festival has the meaning of the Greek Lycaea, or Feast of Wolves, which make it seem of great antiquity and derived from the Arcadians, a region of Greece, in the following of Evander. Indeed, this meaning of the name is commonly accepted, for it can be connected with the she-wolf of the story. And besides, we see that the Luperci, more of whom in a bit, begin their course around the city at that point where Romulus is said to have been exposed. However, the actual ceremonies of the festival are such that the reason for the name is hard to guess. Well, that's what Plutarch says. An alternative source is Ovid. Now, that most Roman of poets, living in the time of Augustus, late 1st century BC, wrote a number of long poems, one of which was called the Fasti, which is basically a poetic description of Roman religious festivals. This is what he says in the Fasti, Book 2. This third morning after the Ides sees the naked Luperci and the rites of two-horned Faunus enacted. Pierian muses tell the origin of the rites and where they were brought from to our Latin home. They say the ancient Arcadians worshipped Pan, the god of cattle, he of the mountain heights. Mount Followy was witness, and the Stymphalian waters, and Ladone that runs its swift course to the sea, the ridges of the Nonacrine grove, circled with pines, high Tricrine and the Parisian snows. Pan was the god of cattle there, and the mares. He received gifts for guarding the sheep. Evander brought his woodland gods with him. There where Rome stands, there was merely a sight. Well, slightly more poetic and hard to understand, but clearly not the same origin as Plutarch suggests. So, we don't know because the Romans themselves didn't know. We do know quite a bit about what happened, not least from the writer Dionysius of Halicarnassus. Now, he was a Greek from Asia Minor, now Turkey, writing in the 1st century BC. He tells us that the events of the festival, the ritual of the festival, began in the Lupercal, supposedly the Wolf's Cave in the Palatine Hill. Now it's interesting at this point that there's an attempt, clearly a clear attempt, to make this religion historical. And in that it's pretty different from the rather out there mythology connected with Eleusis, which I spoke about yesterday. The priests, who were drawn from the Roman nobility, gathered in this cave. They made sacrifices and then divided themselves into two teams. Now this sacrifice is a bit odd. It involved dogs and goats. Their heads were sprinkled with mola salsa, a sort of salted meal. Their throats were slit. The sacrificial knife, was then dipped in blood, and blood was dropped or smeared onto the heads of the priests. This was then wiped off almost immediately with milk-soaked wool. I have no idea why. And then laughter was supposed to follow. As was usual in Rome at a sacrifice, the guts of the victims, these dogs and goats, were then inspected by a haruspex to find out whether it was good omens or not. The word haruspex itself, a soothsayer, literally means the gazer at guts, so the haruspex. Now you may be thinking this is all worthy of laughter, it's so weird, but more oddity followed. A feast of sacrificial meat of the dogs and goats happened, washed down with plenty of wine. And then the skins of the victims was cut into strips, so strips of dog leather and goat leather, and some of these created a sort of garment, which was to be worn during the next part of the ritual. Moving from the cave to the outside, clad only in strips of dog or goat leather, the Luperci then raced around a set course round the middle of Rome, wearing nothing but this dog and goat leather. And the runners ran through the Forum and, of course, around the Palatine back to where they'd started off. And the idea was that on the way, the runners aimed to whip spectators with the leather strips, which was thought to endow fertility on women who were struck, and pregnant women would be assisted to have an easy birth, and barren women would then be able to conceive. According to Plutarch, it was a particular aim of upper-class women to be so struck. Well, most modern audiences would certainly have laughed by now. So what was the attraction? Well, it's connecting to antiquity, that sense of historicity almost, connecting a ritual with Rome's earliest foundation. There's a sense of belonging involved in this, and celebrating something that was very Roman, because this was not done anywhere else. Maybe it was the whole idea of a bit of a fun day out at a miserable time of year, but I think more than anything else, even though people had long forgotten what it was really all about and what the origins were, there was always a fear in Roman religion of not doing what your ancestors had done. Because if you stopped doing what had been done for ages, then the gods might not like you.